video, I'll explain what getter and setter functions are for classes. So let's first create a class, and I call this employee. And inside the class, I have a few private member variables, such as a name, and let's say age. And then these are private. So private means they can only be accessed from within the object. So basically from within this block of code. And if we want to expose them and provide access to these variables, we need to define getter and setter functions. So let's first start by defining a prototype for a setter function for the name. And then we provide a prototype for a getter function for the name. So the setter method is always for setting a value. So it's always a void, since it doesn't return anything, and expects a single argument, which is the value that will be set to the same named member variable. And then we have a getter function which returns the value of that same name property. So here it's set name get name, which refers to the name property. Now I do the same with the age property. So we have a void function set age, and it will be passed an age, which is of type int, and then a get age to get that value. Now getter and setter don't need to be provided for every single member variable. It's only for those that we do want to expose. And sometimes we may just want to expose them with read access. In that case, we would only define a getter function for these. So that means they can only be read. They can never be changed. But if we provide a setter function, they can be changed as well. So then down here, I'll implement these. So I have employee set name, and here I use the this keyword, this name equals name. So this always refers to the current object. This is actually a pointer to the current object. Now to give you an example, let's say I create an employee variable here, and this is now an object, and I can do e.setName, and I pass in a name here, John. This essentially is the e object here. So when I call setName, essentially what's happening here is, you can imagine it like this, that there are two variables. One is the employee, and one is the name. So kind of like I would be doing this. This is kind of how you can imagine it. If I have set name, I pass an e maps to this, and it's a pointer, even though it doesn't completely line up here, but this maps to e, and then we have the name that is passed in. And when I do this name, it refers to the member variable, and when I just use name by itself, in this case, it uses the local parameter, or the local argument here that is passed in. So that to give you an explanation for what this is. Then we do implement the getter function, which is get name. And here all this does is return the name. So optionally, I could do this as well. It doesn't really matter in this case. Typically, this is useful when we want to distinguish between two variables that happen to have the same name. And one is local, like here a parameter, or the member variable. Now, same thing I do with the age. So I have the setter function for age. And here I do this age equals age. So the value that is passed in as age, will be set to the same name member variable. And then I have employee get age, which returns the value of the member variable. And these are the getter and setter functions. Now, why do we do this? Why don't we just do e.name equals John? The reason for this is that, first of all, we don't want to expose our internals of the class. So we want to hide as much as we can. By doing this, we expose that we have a name, we have a member variable called name. If I do set name, there may be a member variable, but there may not be. Maybe the structure is completely different. So by hiding this allows much more flexibility. In the future, maybe I want to split name up into first name, last name. And so when this is passed in, I can do some processing on it. And the code that utilizes these setter and getter methods, they don't have to change. All I can do is just change the class, change the externals, the internal workings of the class and the internal member variables. And the interface where other code interacts with my class, this still stays the same. So that is one advantage. The other advantage is that I have control over the values that are set on my member variable. So for example, for age, if I say an age can only be between 0 and 100, I can control it here. If I were to expose this member variable, I have no control. It could be assigned whatever somebody wants to assign it. But if outside code can only set it with the setter function, I could say if age is larger or equal to 0 and age is less than or equal to 100, then I will set it. Otherwise, I'll just ignore it. Or I could throw an exception or do something else. So these setter methods and getter methods, they provide a way of guarding against invalid values or if an invalid state of an object, if you will. So the habit is always to use member variables that are private or protected, so they can only be accessed from within a class, or with regards to inheritance from inherited classes. And then we may expose getter and setter methods to expose them to external code. Okay, thank you for watching.